engage the legal community. We need to engage the business community, and then I'm really glad that we are slowly also able to engage the community of coders and software engineers and people, developers, designers who do things and automate things with us and for us. And I don't think we should be automating the cow dung type of contracts. We should be automating comic book contracts and new kinds of contracts, visual contracts. And I thought that I'd share a few examples of the ones that we have been making with Stefania. They are not comic contracts, but they are visual contracts. So let me find my examples. I'm trying to get the one.
No, I think this way is.
Okay, thanks. Right. Thank you. Here's a case study that we did in Canada. And I wanted to share this with you because this was a case study where the people were literate, but illiterate, meaning unwilling to learn or unwilling to read, even though they knew how to. This was a case study in an energy sector where we were invited to work with a company who wanted to have Aboriginally owned companies as suppliers. So they invited us, meaning in this case Rob Waller and Jenny Waller from the Simplification Center, myself, and then the client's team. We wanted to have, or the company wanted to have a social license operating among the First Nations communities, and engaging local contractors was their goal. But the challenge was the typical way you approach suppliers, namely 150 pages of this kind of thing. Invitation, which is not inviting, very formal language. You must delete this if you're not responding, and you have to comply with all requirements, and if you don't, then terrible things will happen. So the usual package that we lawyers are so accustomed to and don't even notice what we're doing. But with this, they couldn't invite local or small suppliers. And there was not just that one page. There were really so many pages and so many appendices, and everything was about the contract terms, the legal terms, and the bidding process. Scope was somewhere at page 80. So the reader would have to browse and read through a whole lot of irrelevant stuff for them. This is how it looked, same all through the text. But what we did with the team was we changed the look and feel of the document. It became longer. There's really quality simplification and quantity simplification. We did quality simplification. So we added icons, we added really a different way of talking to the supplier, personalized, clear topic headings, making it easier, and color coding, iconizing, so that you can find what you're interested in and then have a closer look. A map, offer of personal help, various ways to make it easy for the supplier to bid and also to comply. So what we did is really taking bits and pieces that were located all over the documentation package and put them into user guides, or guide to invoicing, guide to pricing, requirements, and having them grouped so that it would be easy for a supplier to find what the supplier was interested in. And guide to invoicing would be visual. There would be a document template showing how the supplier better send their invoices to get paid in time. So it's easier for the supplier to comply. Checklist for key information was included. Now what we didn't manage to do is get rid of the legal text, so we used layering instead. Layering is a great tool used by designers where you leave the text as it is. This is the standard terms and conditions. Then we added a version of the text saying what it is that this thing says, and then headings. And then at the bottom it says, this is the legally meaningful or binding text. So we didn't say this was all legally binding, but it's there and makes it easier for people to read. And various ways this is reported in JSCAN, Journal of Strategic Contracting and Negotiation, how this was done. So it's possible, it's doable, and it has been done. And the ISCCM has granted it its Innovation Award, similar to what Robert's work has been recognized at the ISCCM. Here's another example. This is a different approach, content simplification, a bottling agreement from a brewery. And what this company did, the Path Clearer approach by Scottish and Newcastle, they went from a number of pages to one page and one attachment. What they did is really they relied on the underlying legal terms and the underlying default rules. They said there's no minimum duration for this agreement. We'll simply continue to do business so long as it is mutually beneficial to do so. So there's no 10-year commitment or even a year commitment. We work together as long as it makes sense for both of us. Doesn't fit everywhere, but where it does, then it's a great way of simplifying and getting rid of much of the content. And then towards the end they say, we have agreed upon the essential elements of our contract. Rather than incur time and expense negotiating and recording in writing other non-essential terms and conditions, we have agreed to allow the general law to regulate such matters, implying such terms as it may. The Path Clearer approach has also been reported, so if you're interested, you might want to look it up. It's an interesting approach, even though 12 years old. Style guides. Many of you are probably familiar with the Adobe Legal Department Style Guide, a way to scale and let other people share your style. It's a great resource, also freely available on the internet, showing you what you can do with the content to improve it. And layering. Layering we have used a lot, and this is probably the best known example. This is not ours, this is Creative Commons. They have an icon, and if you're familiar with the system, then you can easily recognize by this icon what's in there. But if you want to know more, then you can read the human readable version or the lawyer readable version, and there's even a machine readable version. So all of these taken together, they say these 3 layers of licenses ensure that the spectrum of rights isn't just a legal concept. It's something that the creators of works can understand, their users can understand, and even the web itself can understand. And this is how it looks, the human readable version, a summary really, and the legal code, the lawyer readable version. It's longer than this, but you get the picture. Now, I will probably jump over comic contracts and go to what we have been doing with Stefania and what others have been doing. This was really my inspiration, not this particularly, but the change from this, which is really New York city regulations, they made this poster of it, showing do this, don't do this. And very few words, a lot of pictures showing people how they can put their vehicle on the streets and what's okay and what's not okay. There's tens of pages of this. This is what streets are okay and what streets are not okay. And these vendors are not, they are not native English speakers and they are not lawyers. They cannot afford a lawyer, so this is how they now show where to go and where not to go. A map, very simple. And I took this thing and went to various companies. You can download this on the internet as well, and tried to convince people. And finally we found a few companies in Finland who went along. This is Stefania's work, taken from her dissertation. She tested a version with text only, with a bullet point version, and then one where she added icons. And guess which one tested best? The students loved the experience with the one with the icons, and they hated it with the ones. Now, why is it that we just would need to use words in contracts? What we have done is we have added various ways of explaining the content. And I am a believer in examples, even in contracts, and these just are examples of contract visualization patterns that we have used. Actually inserted them, embedded them in the contracts, supplementing the text or clarifying the text. Flowcharts, timelines, tables, swim lanes, icons, delivery diagrams, color coding, checklists, layering. Tools that I'm sure designers and some of us use intuitively, but also we can collect examples, and we have. Margaret Hagan and I wrote a conference paper on contract design patterns. So if you're interested, we have a few patterns there, and we hope to add more. So if you can share your patterns, we'd love to hear from you. Here's one that we did with Stefania. There was a guide for agile terms in IT supplies. The terms were not agile, the projects were supposed to be, but what we did was reorganizing the text and adding colors so it would be more interesting for people to find. Here's what we have done: linear timelines, so it's text plus a timeline, and here's a cyclical timeline, text plus flowcharts, swim lanes, in or about contracts, delivery diagrams. Where exactly does delivery happen? Here, the products are unloaded at the destination, named in the customer's order. So rather than relying on Incoterms or abbreviations only, we draw a picture, or Stefania draws a picture, and then we match the text with the image. This is where we did our first 5 years of experimenting user experience usability in complex systems. We did it with contracts, and then Stefania and I have been doing legal design jams, various locations. This is one of the very first one at Stanford, where we got people together around this Wikimedia trademark policy. It had been already rewritten. It was rather user-friendly or reader-friendly, plain language, but it wasn't inviting to read. So we invited people together, and what we did during a day, we created an executive summary. And then that was finalized, and it has been taken into use by Wikimedia. They are available on the internet. There's icons, there's the questions that people most often ask: may I use the marks? And then, yes, please, yes, but first, and sorry, no. So it helps users to find what they want to find. And does it work? Stefania's research shows that it does work. More accurate compensation, faster comprehension. The people like the experience. So there's a lot of good things that can follow. And then one byproduct of her research was that people who negotiate contracts and are not native speakers, that difference that they have disappears. They are as strong negotiators as native speakers once there are images in the contract. So visualized contracts would be recommended for people cross-border negotiations. Contract visualization really improves the user experience, and Stefania's research dissertation will give you proof of that. We have also, Tom and our colleagues, we have edited a special issue of JSCAN, so there's interesting contents there for those of you who want to read more. We've started early in Finland the visualization in education. I was doing that with Annika Varjonen in the 90s, and then we came to visualization about contracts. And then when Stefania joined us, then we started to do visualization in and about contracts. And now what I see happening here is visualization as contracts, the comic contracts. So there's a lot of research around these and examples also. And what we are aiming at is really trying to get rid of those silos where lawyers and subject matter experts and people in business, in technology work separate from one another. With the new design, the new mindset, we see the possibility of having people working closer together towards clarity, understanding, better decisions, faster, better results, and ease of doing business. And that's where I think I stop. And if there are questions, then Tom and I will be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
I don't know whether you want to come and sit at the panel top, and that might be easier if you get questions.
Okay.
There's one.
If I may, thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's excellent. I'd just like to go back to the group that's in Calgary. So there's a contract that you showed, and it was for a group of Native people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm actually really curious about that one. I'm curious about how you got buy-in. So my clients are Aboriginal communities, and we get contracts from the state of Western Australia that are incredibly dense, very dense. They're worse than I used to review service contracts, and they're doubly dense. And there's an agenda there, I believe. I'm a little biased, but there's an agenda for making them so dense. Some of my clients have incredibly high literacy rates. Some of my clients signed their names with X's. So I really like this idea. There are contracts coming up. How do I get buy-in from the state of Western Australia for this, where their contracts have been dense for a really long time? So how do you get buy-in from the other side?
This is really an interesting question, I think, for us all. So why don't we start collecting ways of making it happen? My experience has been that we need to sell it, the idea we need to find champions, both among the lawyers and then among the business, as high as we can get. But what is your experience? I mean, you probably have, all of you, worked with this challenge.
Well, when this project first started off, we had an amazing buy-in from the local government here. So the Department of Education and Department of Finance in the local government, and we also have people here from the federal government law departments. There is a lot of push, it's my understanding now, in government to simplify and to make the contracts more usable. this is a great time to contact them directly and say, this is what we need. There seems to be a lot of, and I think Jenny can probably help with that, there seems to be a lot of policy pushing really hard for the simplification of contracts in government. So, great time to ask.
Can I just suggest, don't phone, write to the Chief Executive of the Department of Finance, because he won't, of course, he or she, of course, will not answer it, but for the first time you'll be putting it on the radar.
Okay, so it's a request, it's a write-in.
Yeah, could you please
Yeah.
tell me what steps you're taking to make contracts usable for Aboriginal organisations to be able to tender? Because I'm sitting in the same kind of position in the Commonwealth, and I could answer that question,
Okay.
but I can't answer it for WA.
Thank you very much.
But I know who to put you in touch with, and this person is extremely interested in proactive contract remodeling.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for the change of government a year ago, they would have funded our research. We were actually on the financial budget for WA for this project. It would have happened, except for the change of
It
government.
would actually help them to advance an agenda they're trying to run.
Oh,
So,
I didn't know. Thank you for that. But I didn't know that there was an agenda. I hadn't seen it, so even knowing that is really
There is,
helpful.
and they
So I
were
appreciate
very,
that.
very keen
Yeah.
to work with us, and they were very happy to fund research students and PhD students and everything, and then change of government, politics, it happens. So, yeah, great question. Economy.
I was going to say,
And
right
we-
to Premier and Cabinet as well, because the Service Priority Review changes have just come out, and there's a big push into making state government services far more accessible and with an end user focus. So there's huge emphasis happening through Premier and Cabinet at the moment. So this
And
would be
suggest specific actions. I mean, whenever somebody suggests something, suggesting something that can be done is also very constructive.
Well, that was the point I was going to make, is that it's one saying, what are you doing, but it's well, how about we do this? And that's where, what Camilla's, I think if you can point to where there's been work done, and usually government's quite pleased when they hear that people are actually doing research or work in the field, and that's, of course, the partnership between academia and the business world and the government world.
Cool. There's
And-
actually one project. Yeah. So thank you. Cool. Okay.
And I need to
That's
talk to
what
you
I
because
need.
we're also working
Yeah.
with Aboriginal services in
Yeah.
different contexts. So, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, so using a neutral, in a sense, body, and I imagine that's what you've done a lot with university work. You're located in university, but you're doing work with enterprise and business. That it works well for both sides, because I think even Tom was saying the same thing, that most people in academia actually want to make change for good out there, but it's getting the synergy. I mean, Camilla's done a brilliant job of making that happen, but it's not easy.
It's the right time and the right
Yeah,
place.
there's timing, there's timing, there's knowing the right people, but it's building on that, I think.
The IACCM might be interested in these kinds of efforts as well. So if
We are, and we're working closely with a lot of government organisations to try to enhance the awareness of the needs, and also working with Supply Nation to help them, drive some of the changes as well. So that's why we find this work is really important. So I know from First Nations, whether it's in Australia or Canada or other countries, how we can help make a difference with this, and look at it both from the ground level as well as from the government, whether that's state or federal. So that's that influencing part, which is why this conference is so important, to raise awareness, raise understanding, and to give examples of where it's being used successfully. So thank you, Camilla, and everyone else for doing that, because it's got to start somewhere, and also with the work that you've been doing in South Africa as well. So so that's something we're really looking at, and we can lobby. We meet with very senior people a lot, and we can start lobbying that if you want to, show you some examples and raise some of the issues. So that's something that we can definitely do, and it will be a topic of our conference in Brisbane next year.
Thank you, Jen.
I think that apart from your specific example, the challenge really is to try and get people to buy into the this approach to contracting, and it's always, because I practice law in my day job, I'm always confronted with the same thing, because I believe in something. How can I get my colleagues to participate in this? And it's very, they're switched off when you try and educate them, about this thing. So it is very hard to get that type of buy-in. And I think on my reflections on that has been that the conferences like this, the authority of academia, the authority of people like Matthew, that was Howard, is that right?
Yeah, so Matt Howard, the president of the West Australian Bar Association, he gave us a fantastic speech for those of you who weren't there yesterday. He likened this to the old monkhood and the priesthood of the legal profession having to wake up and smell the coffee, and how proud we should be in Perth that we're at the centre of it.
So the authority of someone like him, QC, etc., that affirms this approach is really, really important. And then the other approach, I think, is to get the contracting parties, the clients themselves, to insist on it. So what I've started doing recently is with any deal, there's always a term sheet or a heads of agreement that the business people themselves will kind of try and capture. And at that point, I say to them, guys, insist that your contract is drafted in simple, easy to understand language. Make that a term of your term sheet, of your heads of agreement. Because that's an instruction to the lawyer. And if you as a client feel that that agreement is not readable for you to your satisfaction, reject it. Send them back and let them do it again, so that the business people can actually start taking control of the deal, and not be imposed upon by this kind of
shocking.
And I find that's important from a relational point of view as well between the contracting parties, so that they signal to each other how they want to do business. Because I think it would be interesting to see if one party says, we want to have our contracts to be simple, functional, and understandable, and the other one says, no, I'm not willing to agree to that. I want something that's dense and give me a heads up over you. So I think that's the point where business people can start reasserting control over the contracting process.
That's an excellent point, and that's what John Maguire was outlining this morning that Oricon did, when the law firm that shall not be named, when they just pushed back and said, well, that's lovely, but we want to take that risk, because this relationship is more important to us than whatever risks are in your heads. So that's exactly right.
I can add sort of an in-house legal perspective to that, because we're going through that sort of process trying to get buy-in, and it really depends who you need buy-in from. If we're trying to get buy-in from the business leaders within the business, working out what matters to them, they're talking in terms of the benefits, which is typically cost out, increased revenue, and something that has metrics behind it really, really helps in that conversation. If you can show that someone else has done it, they saved X amount of dollars.
So that's where Robert's research has been fantastic, because I've been able to take some of his data, the onboarding costs from 4 hours to 45 minutes, everyone's eyes light up, ooh, savings. No dispute at all after the first season, ooh, more savings. Then they really listen. So that kind of data, we need more of that, and with time we'll get it, because these contracts are beginning to come out of the woodwork.
And it's also the softer elements of brand recognition and awareness. Tie that back to a metric of your actual brand awareness in the market or brand consideration. That also helps.
Absolutely, thanks, Matt.
When we went into the simplified form of contract that we've now been using for 3 years, we estimated that we'd knock about 10% off our contracting costs for both suppliers and the Commonwealth. We've actually knocked 90% of our time off for suppliers, and the time to actually get into a contract now has gone down from typically 6 weeks or more to less than a week.
Can I quote you on that?
Pardon?
Can I quote you on that? Would you let me use that
No.
data and research?
You could say that, no.
No.
Sorry, we've not released those metrics because they seem wildly improbable, but they've actually been tested with a number of both contractors to the Commonwealth and also. Now, I should mention that these are for contracts less than $1 million, so this isn't for your multi-billion dollar, which we also buy, but I'm not involved in writing the 4-page contracts that go with those. So there's lots of things that we actually dropped out that we no longer even have to think about. So one of them is, and this is particularly interesting for Aboriginal organisations,